All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Hope you're all doing well on this wonderful Friday afternoon. Um, and we are going to give a few minutes for everybody to sign in and get into this particular meeting. We have 213 people so far. Nesha, that's a pretty good start, I reckon.
I think it's for what are we in, week 6 of the year? It is an incredible start to us on a Friday afternoon when none of us actually want to be here anymore. We're all ready to clock out for the week. Honestly, this morning I woke up going, "Yay, it's the weekend," and then realized it wasn't. And there was a whole
Well,
nother day.
the weekend starts on Friday for some. That's
Oh, yes, I wish it was me. We
okay.
have a lot to get through, and I think if we've made sure that, oh yeah, we've got over 200 people in now, so we are recording. So if anyone misses this in terms of the slides or any information, you can always come back to it, and we will be giving you QR codes and referring to a whole lot of other stuff that comes up. So I think, Paul, the best thing we can do is start.
Well, welcome everyone, and I will start by acknowledging the traditional owners on the lands that we are meeting on across this wonderful country of ours. Acknowledge elders past, present and emerging, and any First Nations people we have here on the webinar today. Well, I think what I'd say is we've decided on Fridays to host our gender-based undervaluation webinar series, because it is closer to the weekend, and Friday night's always a good time to have a glass of wine as you're trying to understand and absorb the changes that you are applying from there. And so today, we'll acknowledge obviously Nesh's support through the webinar, and Liz and Eva in the background, who many of you will have engaged with over the years as part of our over the last 12 months as part of our WRP team. And note that their support via the WRP phone number is always open to you. What we'll do today is we're going to run through a particular segment. Now, I will preface and we'll be clear about what today's meeting is going to cover, what today's webinar, and I'll promote the fact that there is another webinar in 2 weeks' time, this exact same time, Friday, the 20th of February, where we will go into the next section of content. So today, our intention is to cover how you translate employees to the new Children's Services Award classification levels there. Working out how it applies, looking at some of the mapping issues that will come up through the conversation or through your work in identifying how this impacts your workplace. Some of those are immediate and transitional in nature only, and some of those might be a little bit more significant in nature. And we'll also want to talk you through where you could be up to in your journey as you manage the changes from the old or the current Children's Services Award until the next iteration of it. To be really clear, what we will not cover today is how this impacts pay rates or how it translates to pay rates there. We're not going to cover, where the key differences between the workplace instruments just yet and how that applies to pay rates. And we're not going to go through the WRP scenarios. That's next. And I think there are a couple of really important reasons for that. One, the department has not yet published the WRP rates as it interacts with the new Children's Services Award structure. So I want to flag that up front. Those pay rates, it's not so much the translation of pay rate, a base rate in the award that is complicated. It is the interaction with the WRP component, but we cannot provide that exact context until we get to the department releasing its rates there, and they will be doing that no doubt sometime soon. To be fair to the department, they are waiting for something important to happen before they can release that. They're not sitting there on their hands for no reason waiting. There is a reason behind that, and we hope that that gets resolved very, very efficiently so that we can work on that with you. We're going to talk
Can I ask, Paul, if we want feedback, do we want people to use the chat function or the Q&A function?
Ideally, the Q&A function would be the best, Nesha. Thank you for
Yeah.
checking in on that, only because we can then track those, and whatever we don't get to today, we'll update FAQs and manage that process from there.
Whereas the chat function dies if we don't get back to it. So please, 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 and I will remind you all, use the Q&A function. That means that we can look at this, and anything we don't get to, we will eventually, if not now, address in a fortnight. As Paul said, there is a lot, and we really needed to break it down. And so you really need to come back in a fortnight as well.
Yeah, and
More
look, I
homework
think
for you.
and I think what I would say is I want to stress, you know, we have an implementation timeline here as to where we should be up to, and I do want to stress that whilst this obviously is occupying a lot of our minds at the moment in terms of what this looks like and how we're going to deal with it in our services, there is time. Okay, so there is time to understand this and implement that, and we'll work through that specific scenario and when and how you need to think about what changes are occurring through today's webinar there. But at the moment,
I think you and I were discussing this morning that worst case scenario, the most urgent timeframe is the 7th of March.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yep.
And we'll give you some context as to why we talk about that through this conversation. But you know, from an implementation perspective, really the first thing that you need to know, are you covered by the Children's Services Award? That includes those using an IFA, or are you covered by your own private EA or an MEA in place? Because the treatment of this classification change is distinctly different from one under each of those instruments from there. And where we're up to today and is really to give you the tools to be able to map your existing employees from their previous classifications to the new classification levels, should that apply to you as part of the being covered by the Children's Services Award. For those who are covered by the MEA, and I know the question in the chat already, yes, your classifications do not change as of the 1st of March. That is true. That is how this works. But that doesn't mean that this information's not it doesn't have value for you, because when the MEA is renegotiated, the classifications will change, and that will end up being sometime in late this year. So it's not that far away.
There's also an interaction with the worker retention payments and how you track that and how you record that we will get to, and our tools are designed to help you with that. So you do need to, I'm under the MEA as well, but you do need to kind of stay and pay attention there.
Yeah, and I mean, to be really direct about the question in the chat as well, just want to flag that we all use different software, admin payrolls, you know, all manner of things there. We can't talk to how each of those various platforms will respond to the changes and whether you're covered by award or not covered by award and what that looks like. That's a conversation to have with them. The implications of ensuring that you're compliant with the conditions of your workplace instrument is a legal obligation on the employer, not on the platform that you're using there. So it's up to you to make sure that they are doing what you need them to do to ensure you can meet your obligations as an employer moving forward. Okay, so that's just an important chat.
However, third-party software providers who are online here, get in touch with us. We can work with you to try and make it as easy as possible. But again, the obligation is on the employer, who are the people that we are representing, not third-party provider software people.
All right. So we'll move forward here. So it sounds great. When we're simplifying the award, we're moving from roughly 30 odd classifications down to 8. And over the longer term, still maintain that this actually is a good thing for our sector in terms of simplifying classifications and protecting, ensuring the accuracy of classification moving forward. But like with any major transition, it can be a little bit messy until we get to the other side, until we apply this in practice. You know, as we say here, that the timing of when you implement a reclassification is entirely dependent on the workplace instrument. So to be very explicit, if you are covered by the MEA, you are not changing classification structure, so that if you have an educator who is a level 3.1 now, they will still be a level 3.1 under the MEA as of the 1st of March. That doesn't change. We're not talking about pay rates, we're talking about the classification itself. If you are covered by, if you have an IFA, or you're not in receipt of the worker retention payment at all, which is entirely valid scenario that occurs out there, as of the 1st of March, you will have to reclassify your employees and translate that to the new classification structure. That is really critical here. A lot of this work here, what will be more urgent for some of you than it is for others based on the workplace instrument in your workplace. The other thing to remember, it only affects Children's Services Award staff who are educators. And what I mean by that is it doesn't affect teachers. Teachers are not being reclassified. The Educational Services Teachers Award has 5 levels. They will remain identical, nothing changes. And the distinction is that support workers and that this under the Children's Services Award are also not changing their classification structure as well. So that's very, very significant part for you to understand. The large majority of your workforce, however, is very specifically going to be changed under the Children's Services Award reclassification processes there. What's important is to actually none of this changes the work they do. The job they're doing today is the same job they're going to be doing in March, and that's absolutely critical here. But as you know, people are legally classified under the various conditions of that particular award. There. Nesha?
Can I just jump in? We've disabled the chat again because we want things to be recorded through Q&A, and I've just had a couple of text messages come in on the side of people who can't get to the Q&A. If you change your webinar screen structure so that you can see, if you collapse it slightly, you should see across the top of your toolbar things, tools like chat, Q&A, people, all that kind of stuff, camera, mic, the same place you're deciding whether or not you're on camera or your mic is on or anything like that, you should be able to see Q&A. If you don't, those people who are already sending me messages can text me again or text us at. But we will get back to you. And if at the end of this, we still haven't been able to respond to your question or a question that's similar, please email us and we'll get back to you. So don't panic just now. But yes, chat's been disabled for a particular purpose so that we make sure that we cover everything off, but just try and change your screen a little bit so that you can see the Q&A.
Yeah,
all right, sorry, keep going, Paul.
That's okay. And I just responding in the chat, that there is a template letter and FAQ that provided in our ACA member toolkit.
Yes.
But on our WRP website, there is a fact sheet for that is open to the public to download, which explains the changes, a 4-page fact sheet there. And so that's been published for probably 2 weeks now. I'm sure that the team, Liz or Eva, can put that link to that in the chat there.
And Sean, that was a big thing for me, is how do we explain to people what's happening for them right now? And so we've got a template for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I had the joy of having a staff meeting last night and talking through that fact sheet with my staff last night as well. So it is actually really critical that it's there, but 100% that is exactly where we can do that.
And yes, the question is, does a pay rate change from the first full payroll after the 1st of March? Classification changes, and you will need to determine pay rate, and that's a part of our webinar in a fortnight. It's not necessarily the pay rate that changes. The classification changes from the first full payroll after the 1st of March.
Yeah,
right,
but I think
Paul,
that
keep going.
No, I think that the question is really relevant. All changes are the first full pay period after the 1st of March. So, you know, that's absolutely, it's not from on the 1st of March, it's the first full pay period that's there. Okay, this is the new award. And so you can see here For our educators, we move the level 1.1 through to level 6.9, and they move across in this particular way. I know from our last webinar, there was some really interesting questions and commentaries about some of these classifications and how people are using them at the moment, and we will go into a little bit more detail on that through this particular webinar there. But in you know, we're not going to have annual updates to people's wages at anniversaries or anything like that. You are a Certificate 3 qualified educator and you're employed in that role as a Certificate 3 qualified educator, then you are a Level 3 qualified educator moving forward. But again, there's a scenario that we'll walk through, or even within Level 3, that makes that a little bit not as straightforward as it might seem. So there is a question here to look out for, and level 3.3 is a really good example of that. To move, people can move from level 3 to level 4 with experience. Level 3 in the new classification structure. But what we're talking about here as we translate people across is if you have someone who's a level 3.3 and they have 4 years of experience in that role, then they are eligible to become a level 4 educator under the new classification structure there. That's one of the ones that's not quite as direct as it might be. So if you have long-term Certificate 3 staff, there is a very good chance that you will need to consider that they might be a level 3.4 in relation to that reclassification there. There are different phasing arrangements that come into place, and some roles will transition under different phasing arrangements. And one of those in particular is the level 4As, what were the level 4As. Again, reading the decision and determination about how that works. And it's not as common in long day care to have 4As there, but it's not that it doesn't occur from time to time. Again, we'll work you through our classification tool that assists you in this particular space. And I think the other thing is just keep in mind that at least in a transitionary arrangement, some of these classification changes will not result in any changes to the base rate of pay for some of these people. And some of that example on the 1st of March will be level 6.4 to 6.9. Again, we'll discuss that in a lot more detail at the next webinar from there.
Yep. And we've got some questions essentially that people have been paid above award just in terms of classification. Do they reduce their pay? Again, I encourage you to join us in a fortnight, because reducing their pay is basically complex, and ultimately there are so many things that play into this. So the advice would be hold tight, call us, attend next fortnight's webinar, and then make an appointment and call us, and we can talk you through how it applies to you. I'm already seeing all of these things come through, and I am going to honestly be the chucklehead in the room here, that the understanding of this and how it applies to everybody and what happens with MEA versus IFA versus my contract versus your contract is wildly difficult at this time. So don't feel like you're the pork chop sitting in the room going, I just don't understand this, because it is insanely complex. And I would encourage you all to get what you can out of this webinar and the next webinar, and then book some time with our team, and we can talk you through as best we can what's going on for you, and otherwise refer you on to Adler. Paul, back to you.
I think, you know, this is what can you do now, right? Like that, this is really important. I think we are all interested in being able to take control and do the things that we can do now. And so, again, if you are covered by the Children's Service Award and using an IFA, and this would apply to answer one of the questions in chat, would apply to even if only part of your workforce, i.e. your OSH employees, are covered by IFAs there. Yes, you might have different arrangements in different organisations there. I'm one of those people. I have 2 services, one under MEA and one under Children's Services Award. So one of my services will be reclassifying and the other one won't. So I understand the dilemma there that you can find yourself in there. We encourage you to prepare an internal mapping register, and we have a tool that can assist with that, that helps you map for all of your staff from one area to from the old classification to the new classification. Okay.
I'm going to encourage you all to, every single time you do this, print it, keep a hard copy, keep a soft copy, do everything you can so that should you have to come back and refer to it, you can track what you've been doing to understand how you got to the outcome you got to.
Sorry, I've gone backwards and I didn't mean to go backwards there. All right, so I just want to, so this is our online tool, okay? So you can see here that if you go to our online classification tool, you get to choose your workplace instrument and it tells you what you're doing. Once you select the classification, as it applies to your staff, you'll go through it and it'll point and translate that to the new classification structure from there. You can do that for all of your workforce, and you can adjust and modify that as it goes from there. What we do have at the bottom of this tool is a place for you to be able to add all of your staff row by row, and then classify and export that as a CSV for your own records to be able to then use that from there. When we get to the end of the slides, you'll see the link to this updated classification tool. This has changed from the one that we had online 2 weeks ago to allow for the mapping exercise and to add each of your staff members through there. Thank you. I do feel like a level 1.1. That's about right for me.
Can I jump in here? I did actually chat with Seth that I'm wildly, whoa, what are we looking at here? Wildly more classified than you. Well, not particularly. But also, when she jumps back into this, there is a way that you can, if we can pause that for a moment, Paul.
Yep.
There is a way in this that when you just saw, it automatically maps, but there are questions already coming through about, so if they were previously and what now, and they're not in that classification, in our tool, you can override that. So it will automatically map based on a general understanding. But if you're looking at the position descriptions, and Paul can have a chat about this, around room leaders, group leaders, and things like that, if it turns out that they're not automatically going across, you can actually override that in the tool that we've got based on that. So, and then it will update the pay rates so that you can work from there.
So as we navigate this, you will see there are descriptors that define each of those classifications. And there's links to the Fair Work Commission's formal decision, which deals with some of these transition rearrangements as they play out from there. But I encourage you to go to the link, use the tool, input your staff, export the CSV, see what it spits out. If there are any things that require some level of analysis, then if you're an ACA member, you can call the ACA Workplace Relations Advice Line. So some of this stuff is very specific support. That's because this is industrial relations advice, not worker retention payment advice, that our workplace relations advice line run by ABLA would be the most appropriate people to deal with there. All right, we're going to use a case study to try to explain this with some level of accuracy, okay? So Sunny Smiles currently employs a number of individuals, level 4.1, 4.2 or 4.3 under the Children's Services Award. These educators are diploma qualified but have not yet been appointed as room leaders. Again, this is a scenario that was presented to us multiple times through the last webinar. According to the gender-based undervaluation changes, actually 4.1, 4.2 and 4.3 translate to the role of room leader, okay? Why? That's a really important thing that we'll unpack here in the next slide. So, you know, the real genuine question is, given that they are not formally appointed room leaders, Sunny Smiles is seeking clarification on whether they should be transitioned to a level 6 or a level 5, okay? This is, as we've worked out, not uncommon way that people have used the previous award there. One of the many inherent benefits of the new award is that this should be a lot clearer than what it would may otherwise have been. All right, so and in effect, what's happened in this particular example is that these employees may have been misclassified, as they were never formally appointed to be in charge of a group, and that they potentially should have been classified as a level 3.4, because a level 3.4 transitions to a level 5 under the new structure, right? Under the term advanced educator. The current wording in the Children's Services Award for level 4.1, 4.2, and 4.3 is a diploma qualified children's services educator that is appointed as the person in charge of a group of children in the age range from birth to 12 years. Now, is it certain that these people have been misclassified? No, not necessarily. What you'd need to do is actually look at the work being performed by these employees before forming a view regarding their misclassification, right? So there is a good chance they may have been misclassified, not definitely certain. And what I would encourage you to do, and if you are in this particular circumstance and you're an ACA member, then you should be calling the ACA Workplace Relations Advice Line. If you're not an ACA member, obviously, we encourage you to join our membership. But this is a specific industrial relations advice that I'm not a lawyer and I will never give to you. That means that you really need to consider what is the right step for you, both in terms of the correct classification and how you manage the pay rate scenario in play there. So
I'd be really careful. There are a lot of people out there giving IR advice who are not lawyers. And you need to be really careful. You're always allowed to make mistakes, but over time you need to make sure that you're taking advice from the right people.
And I think really importantly, and whilst so my understanding has always been a room leader is a level 4.1, 4.2, and 4.3, and any diploma who's not in charge of a group is a level 3.4. Now, that doesn't mean you can't pay people at level 4.1 or 4.2 or 4.3, okay? So that there's a very different scenario as to what you pay people versus what their correct classification is there. How you handle that for contractually and all sorts of other things as we transition, that's an important question that you should get your industrial relations advice about, okay?
Hence me saying it depends what tool you're using. Is it an MEA, IFA, or you're just paying award? And also then what your contract actually says. And these are important things to consider in all of this. Have you employed them as a 4 something, or have you employed them as an educator and over time they've just risen up through the ranks? These are all individual things.
And Janine, your question's entirely relevant. Your position description should help point you in the right direction. Yeah, okay.
Absolutely.
So you know, the importance of your employment documentation is absolutely critical at understanding where you move to. But if you're unsure, access advice in relation to that. But I know,
no case study.
and I just want to reiterate, the level 4.1 came up a lot in the first webinar, okay? And that's why we specifically called out that example. It's not something that you can't work through or was going to be a major problem or anything like that. So don't panic if you find yourself in that case there, but but you just need to be aware of it now that you're mapping people across to get to the right place for all of your staff there. All right, so case study 2, Daisy Chains Early Learning Centre employs Corey, who has been working at a level 3.3 educator since 2024. He holds a certificate 3. Ahead of the changes, Daisy Chains are trying to figure out what award classification Corey will now be covered under. Corey's current award classification description as a level 3.3 is as follows. I'm not going to read it verbatim there. And importantly, there's less than 4 years experience as a level. So
this seems fairly simple, Paul. However,
well, from the 1st of March, what would Corey be? Corey will be a level 3 qualified educator. Why? Because he was previously classified as a level 3.3, and the current role, duty, education, and experience match that level 3 there. But importantly, he only has 2 years experience at that particular level. And so until he achieves the right experience level, he can then progress to a level 4 from there. So again, calling out one that might not be as straightforward as others, and that you actually need to do your maths on in relation to someone's
And
work
this
history.
is, and you and I haven't, I'm just throwing this question at you at random. Is this prorated? If they're working 2 days a week, do they need to get that many days up, or is 2 days a week over that period of time?
I'm going to
Plus
take
the,
that on notice. In most
yeah,
cases, it's full-time
sorry, I didn't mean to
equivalency.
do that.
No,
Sorry.
so Nigel would be the man to answer that one, not me. But in most cases, in most awards, there's full-time equivalency to the experience stuff. But
Yeah.
we will take that on notice and manage that from there.
Yep. Good.
All right.
Sorry, didn't mean to do that.
No, thanks. It's fine. It's always good to be kept on my toes, Nisha. No problems at all. So, all right. So I think that what's part of this that's really important is, as always, when we're managing workforce, there's what are we legally obliged to do. That's absolutely essential. But often it's an issue of communication and making sure we're communicating with them. And I'm sure part of your capacity to be able to look at this is to be able to make sure that you can communicate to your staff as efficiently as possible about the changes. Again, I encourage you, the fact sheet that is at the link that Liz has pinned to the top of the Q&A, that it explains it in quite specific detail. It talks about the interaction with WRP, and it talks about a whole range of things there. Giving people notice before there are any changes to their payslip, or if you reissue employment contracts or anything like that, is absolutely important. The classification
Social
outcomes.
media, and if you don't give them information, and I am, spent way too much time on social media, but if you don't give them the information ahead of time, they hit social media, and I hate to say that a lot of the responses that they're getting are incorrect, and then they get upset. And you've got to basically talk them back from being really upset because they've been given incorrect information. It's part of the reason why, and I was saying to Sean earlier, that we have templates under the toolkit for ways to communicate with staff to make sure that they feel like they're on top of this, they understand it, and they know what's going on. Whether or not their pay rate changes, whatever's going on, them understanding it is really important, because their other options are to go to, and every time I see this on social media, I keep saying, look, either contact ACA or contact the Fair Work Commission. Don't pay attention to people telling you stuff, but you can't stop that. So being ahead of it, like Paul was saying, being on the front foot is really important during what is going to be an unsettling time.
I think, some of them will know where their current classification is. Some of them may not even recognise where they are in the classification structure. I think that explaining changes and how they're going to interact is important. What I would say, confirm your hours, your roles, and I think where worker retention payment is being applied, I think the most critical thing for people to know is, and the fact sheet again explains this in quite a lot of detail, is that their pay rate will not change after the 1st of March. How it looks might change, but the total that they receive is not going to change after the 1st of March. It's just it's an arrangement that sits underneath that. And so I think
That's all going to be explained in a fortnight.
yeah,
How this all, part of it
that's
gets
the message.
absorbed, part of it's offset. It depends if you're paying above award. It is an enjoyable part of your brain that you're going to have to dedicate to this for a short period of time.
Yeah, and if you're one of those people who is not covered by the worker retention payment at the moment, then if you're paying the award rates for those staff, base award rates for those staff, then you will be making changes to their rates of pay as of the 1st of March. Okay, so that is quite a different issue. If you're not part of the worker retention payment, you will need to consider that, and that will need to be communicated to ensure you're compliant there. So From an ACA perspective, there are in your member portals across the country, there are template contracts there which have been validated and checked again since the last webinar to ensure that they are compliant. Nigel's answer in relation to whether the contracts need to be changed after the classification changes. It depends on what is on your current contract there and how it's worded.
All the time.
Yeah, if you're a member, contact the ACA Workplace Relations Advice line because they will give you that very specific advice. In some cases, they will need to be changed. In some cases, they won't need to be changed, but I'm not qualified enough to give you that advice on this particular session.
All right.
So from a summary perspective, look, you can't change any payroll until you know what the classification is, until you've reclassified people, okay? The sequencing of these webinars is for you to begin the reclassification process and iron out any kinks, i.e. the level 4 situation we spoke about or whatever the case may be. The payroll outcomes we will talk to you about in quite a lot of detail because there's about 8 different scenarios that we'll need to navigate as to when and how you make changes to your payroll system as a result of these changes there. And we will deal with that quite specifically. Again, you must know the classification mapping for those covered by the Children's Services Award before you can consider any payroll changes that are in place.
So Paul,
what else?
Those under the Early Childhood Teachers Award, so if you're under the Teachers Award, what happens for them right now?
Nothing for them right now. Everything stays exactly the same for anyone covered by the Educational Services Teachers Award there. And again, I think I suppose, provide some assurance for the timing for when you need to upgrade your payroll system and potentially issue new contracts and do what you need to do is the payroll arrangement changes. Again, the total dollars that someone will receive if they're on the worker retention payment doesn't change after the 1st of March, but the first time that you will need to potentially make some changes to your payroll system administratively is the first full pay period after the 1st of March. For me, for example, my first full pay period after the 1st of March is the 18th of March because I pay fortnightly and that's how it works. So it is not until that, it's not until those pay runs that Nesha and I will be making changes to our payroll systems there. That's a good 5 weeks away from here in my case. And so Nesha made an appropriate comment at the start, which was, do think that the earliest anybody's payroll will need to be changed would be a pay period ending the 7th of March. That would be on the basis that someone is on a weekly pay cycle and the pay period is between the 1st and the 7th of March here, right? So there is a little bit of time. The first full pay period after March, track that for you in your own system to give you the assurance to plan your timeline in relation to how that works in your circumstances. There.
I think also there is going to be, to a certain extent, a bit of leniency that so long as you are very transparent, communicate with your team, if it comes back and there were mistakes and you've tracked it, as we said, as I was saying earlier, track it all, print it out, do everything you can, save version 1, version 2, do whatever you can to help explain how you got to somewhere, that if there were mistakes, that's okay. You're allowed to make mistakes. This is a very confusing time, but you can't just ignore it. Yeah. You do actually have to take action. And the other thing I want to say, sorry, I just had to step off. My cat came near me and now I'm all covered in cat hair. The other thing I do want you to say is, as soon as possible, without even before we're talking about pay rates, try and start working on this a little and then book time with our team, because as we hit closer to like the 7th of March, you're going to have me and WRP team, Liz and Eva, so love me contacting them at 8 o'clock last night saying, I can't find the following data for the following report, because I'm a small business manager and this is how I operate. If you wait until the last minute, there is a chance that our team won't have time to, you know, they're going to be overloaded at the last minute. So please, 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 please book in time with them, knowing that I do most of my admin after hours. I do it on the weekends. I do it after 8 p.m. because I don't have anyone calling me, all of that kind of stuff. And so try and book in some time that works for you within business hours so that you can make sure that you've got a good 20 minutes that suits you, not you calling while you're on the hop, drilling something into the wall, doing blah, 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 but you can look at what's on screen and talk through the team and get the right outcome, and then work out whether or not you may need to escalate to, for example, ABLA's IR advice line, or do other things, or come back, or go away and get copies of your contracts, which all play into this. So as much as we're saying you don't need to panic now, there are no changes you need to make now, the important thing is to just start now so that then you can figure out what you need to do over time.
And I'll be really clear. You guys are taking action because you're participating in these webinars already. You know, I know that you're all thinking about it. I also want to be really clear. The ACA worker retention payment phone line is not going to give you industrial relations advice. It's not their job.
Correct.
That's not it. That's what the ACA members will get through the ABLA advice line, okay? How the WRP interacts with the changes, that's what the WRP line will be there to guide you on, okay? So just be really clear about who and where you need to get that advice from. There is a question around, well, how do teachers get assured that they're not going to lose 15% as of November 26? I'd love to have an answer for that for you. We hope that by the time budget comes around, we have a clearer picture about what the future looks like for that in that scenario there.
It's not just teachers, it's everybody.
Well, but the others' awards are increasing, so the pay won't necessarily go back.
Yes. Okay.
So
yes.
that's the concern. That's Correct. The concern there. Okay.
Well, we just jumped ahead 3 steps, Paul.
I know we're in a long way away. We're in a. If you've done all of the stuff that we've asked you to action today, that is get the classification tool, use it for your workforce. Make sure that you've ironed out the things around whether it's the level 4s or the 3.3s or whatever the case may be. Look at that properly. Make sure that you've got that feeling comfortable. explaining it to your staff so that way they can anticipate what changes are. Use our template letter if you're a member and the FAQ if you are a non-member. And then by the time you've worked all that out, you will hit February 20, and I hope to have you join us for our next webinar, where we'll go into what I call the fun stuff. And the fun stuff is, how does the WRP interact with changes of rates of pay? And what does that look like based on the various instruments you have? And also based on how you are paying your staff at the moment, including whether you pay the WRP as a separate monetary allowance or not, or as one lump sum inclusive of your WRP.
We have a very different definition of fun, Paul. Lindsay
I'm
shared.
a blast at parties, okay? I'm a blast at parties.
Lindsay just asked, share a template of what the pay set will look like, please. That will be in the next webinar, and it also depends, and Lindsay, I hate to tell you, it also depends what current tool you're using and your current pay rates and all the really complex stuff that I really want to be able to say, just do it this way. And unfortunately, a lot of our next webinar will cover that because it is insanely complex. And it's the fun stuff that Paul talks about. It's the anyway, keep going, Paul.
Importantly, read the fact sheets. Here's the QR code. There are resources there. Liz has put the gender-based undervaluation resources that are publicly available at the link there at the top of the Q&A. The ACA toolkit on gender-based undervaluation for members, which is extremely comprehensive, is available behind your member portal. You should have all received comms, both from the national, ACA national, and also your state branches, pointing you to that particular outcome there. But the first thing you can do is make sure you get the new classifications right, if that applies to you in this particular context as of the first full pay after the 1st of March.
And I do want to make it clear that the problem is that under the WRP, under the work retention payment, the free advice line we've got, our staff, as Paul said, aren't legally qualified to review your contracts or whatever's going on. I would encourage you to consider whether or not perhaps joining, not necessarily ACA, but I'm going to say ACA because of me, but ACA or another organisation. And I would also point out that ACA is the most cost effective there. This is me doing a big thing to therefore access our IR advice line, which will help you work through that if any of these contracts are a problem. But we can only go to a certain extent under the WRP free advice line because we can't review contracts. We can't do that kind of thing. That's actual legal advice that this team can't do.
And look, there is a fair question in the chat. If we're not on the WRP, would you recommend still attending the next webinar? Yeah, I think it's still worthwhile because you will see how things come across, because there is a distinction as to whether you are on the award, a paying award, or paying above award.
Oh, the above award payments.
Even if you're not covered by WRP. So
Paul and I were playing yesterday with the tool that we've got on above award payments, and it is difficult even for me to understand. Well, that's not a great example. It's difficult even for Paul to understand with his background in accounting that it is difficult. And I would 100% recommend that even if you haven't taken up the WRP, unless you are, to be fair, unless you are only paying award and you understand your mapping in terms of old award, new award, that's fairly simple. If you have anything in terms of paying above award or anything like that, then you do need to understand all of this. And as we said earlier, there are even translation problems in terms of, were you previously paid as under this rate? This is the 4.1s and 2s. And where do you end up? There's a lot to really still cover. Paul?
And I hope we don't disappoint you and you feel it's a waste of time if you do join us in that particular circumstance. But I think it'll, for me, it's fun. So anyway, I'm sure you'll enjoy it. I'm sure you'll
prepare them for the letdown, Paul. Okay.
And I do get fair question, Scott. Systems sometimes take time to change, so I know that we want to get onto them as quick as possible. Ultimately, it is absolutely critical that the department issues the WRP tables.
I think that's the biggest problem, Scott. As much as we'd like to come out right now and be able to tell you 100% in terms of pay rates what's happening, unfortunately, we don't have written advice from the department. And unlike some other people who might say this is our best advice right now, we don't want you to have to go back through and redo the work. We do want you to hold off until we get 100% correct advice so that you only have to do the work once. I'm with you on this. I want to do the work in advance. I'm the girl who handed in her homework 6 weeks in advance. But it's, Paul?
Well, I think, look, my uncle, who was a carpenter, said measure twice, cut once. I think the same scenario applies here. Let's make sure we've got all the tools to get it right first time, not think it. We don't want to send you down a path where, well, it actually might be different, and then you're going to have to do the work a second time to be able to correct it.
We did have a bit of that with the IFAs when they were first put
That's
out,
correct.
and then the department went, no, actually that doesn't work, and then the Fair Work Commission said that doesn't work, because we have surprisingly, and it will surprise no one on this thing, that certain government departments don't talk to other government departments, and so we were the ham in the middle of the sandwich there, kind of going, well, and so as long as we can given that, like we've said, you've got a bit of time, we're going to say, don't lock stuff in yet. You've still got a bit of time. And as soon as we can, as soon as we get written advice, we will be getting back to you.
And to be fair to the department, as I said earlier, they are not holding it up for any reason other than they are waiting for something important to happen for them to be able to release it. So they're not sitting on their hands for no good reason. There is genuinely important reason why they haven't been able to issue it just yet. So so we hope it comes soon. Don't know, but yeah. Thanks
I would seriously advise in that case, only because, again, I don't want anybody to be doing double work. Just hold off for a little while.
Yeah. All right.
And attend next fortnight's webinar. Come back, see us again.
Thank you, everyone. Again, get to the tool, use it, see how it applies. Again, we're all learning as we go in this process. The online tool, classification tool, is a really, I think, useful way of being able to make that happen quicker for you and as you manage that administration from there. So happy Friday, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon.